The first thing Bennett Crossley noticed on Radian 9 was a scrape that should not have existed. It ran along the inner rail of an emergency litter, a bright line cut through older grayware. The mark was only a few inches long, but its direction was wrong. According to the accident report, the litter had been rolled straight from the maintenance corridor to the station clinic after Orr died. This scrape angled toward the sealed docking hatch, as if the litter had been dragged sideways while the floor pulled in another direction. Bennett crouched beside it before the airlock had finished cycling. "You have not even taken off your travel coat," Talene Orr said behind him. Her voice was controlled, but not welcoming. She was tall, even for a Relon, with bronze skin and faint pale markings at her temples. Those markings stayed still while the airlock lights passed over them. Her dark eyes did not. Bennett ran one finger near the scrape without touching it. "Metal does not care whether I am comfortable. Neither does my station. That is why I would like this investigation completed before our next field cycle." He rose and looked through the inner window. Radian 9 curved away in clean white corridors, broken at regular intervals by pressure doors and red-edged access panels. Beyond the outer hull, Velorum filled half the sky, blue storms turning beneath thin bands of cloud. "A man died," Bennett said. "I'm going to take as long as the evidence requires." Orr was a skilled engineer. His death matters to everyone here. "Then we agree on the important part." The inner door opened. Talene turned toward the corridor, and Bennett caught the smallest release of tension in her shoulders. She had expected resistance. She had probably prepared for arrogance. The dry remark had at least made her recalculate. He lifted his case and followed. "The report says Orr entered a maintenance doorway after the drive test ended," Bennett said. "The door moved under residual load and struck him. That is what the local records show." "Local records?" Talene glanced back. Radian 9 studies controlled gravitational gradients. Different sections do not always agree on time during calibration. The report gave one time. The report was normalized after the cycle. By the station system? Yes. Bennett looked once more at the scrape disappearing behind the closing airlock. Systems make very confident witnesses. The inner door sealed. Every light in the corridor went out. For one breath, there was only the dim blue of Velorum through the docking window. Then emergency strips came alive along the floor. The station lurched. Bennett hit the wall shoulder first. Talene caught a handrail before the changing force could take her feet. A deep vibration moved through the deck. Not an impact, but a sustained thrust building in the wrong direction. An alarm began to pulse. "Orbital correction," Talene said. "That is no correction." They reached the nearest control panel together. Talene pressed her palm to the reader. The display opened, filled with competing timestamps, then collapsed into a simpler emergency view. The orbit line around Velorum had turned red. "The correction engines are firing against the holding vector," Bennett said. "I can see that. Can you stop them?" Talene sent a halt command. The panel accepted it. The vibration continued. She tried a second route, then a local cutout. Neither changed the thrust. "External communications are gone," she said. "The docking clamp has also locked." Bennett pulled up the mechanical status through the emergency layer. His investigator certification granted him read access to any system involved in a transport accident. It did not give him command, but it let him see enough. "Do not release the shuttle," he said. "I was not planning to. The load is twisting the docking collar. If the clamp opens now, it may take part of the airlock with it." Talene studied the same figures, then gave one sharp nod. She opened an internal channel. "ESA, protect the main oxygen loop and report any pressure loss. Jorik, lock all non-essential docking functions and inspect the pressure doors. Letha, place the measurement archive on local power. Torvin, I need the active calibration state at central control." 4 acknowledgments came back, each with a slightly different delay. Bennett, watch the orbit plot update. "How long?" Talene calculated through a separate field model. "A little over 3 hours before we cross the lowest recoverable path. After that, the remaining engines cannot lift us." The vibration eased, then returned in a lower rhythm. The drive was not simply stuck on. Something was feeding it a sequence. A second alarm cut through the first. Talene's face changed. Field storage, she said. She was already moving. Bennett grabbed his case and followed. The corridor bent with the curve of the station. Every few seconds, the emergency lights flickered as power shifted between sections. Talene moved fast but never blindly. At each pressure door, she checked the frame before crossing, watching for the first sign of stress. Bennett noticed. Most administrators ran toward a crisis as if authority could hold a ceiling up. Talene looked at the ceiling. The field laboratory was 2 sections inward. Its main chamber stood behind thick, clear panels, a circular room wrapped in sensor bands and movable containment arms. The storage vault beside it was open. Talene stopped at the threshold. 3 small field samples remained in their separate shielded cases. The cradle for the primary sample was empty. How large is the missing unit? Bennett asked. Not large in volume. Talene stepped to the vault display. Its effective mass depends on the field state. Could one person move it? With a maintenance carrier, yes. Not safely during an active cycle. The vault display showed one access event. A biological authorization seal glowed beside it. Talene or Bennett looked at her. She did not look away. That is my credential. Where were you when this vault opened? In the auxiliary laboratory. Who else can use your credential? No one can use my biology. That was not my question. Her temple markings darkened slightly. The system records the person who created an authorized task. It does not always skin a body again when a scheduled task executes. Was there a scheduled task for this vault? There should not have been. That answer leaves more room than I like. And your accusation contains more certainty than the evidence. Supports. The station shifted again. A low groan came through the wall beside them. Talene checked the chamber frame. We can argue here until Velorum becomes our final destination, or we can find out what happened. Bennett opened his case and took out a compact scanner. You stay where I can see you. This is my station. At the moment, it is also my accident scene. At the moment, it is falling. They held each other's gaze for 1 second too long. Then Talene turned towards Central Control. Come with me, investigator. That was the plan. Central Control was a round room built around a recessed orbital display. Hessabrin stood at one console, hands moving through oxygen maps. Jorik Pell was beside a schematic of the pressure doors. Letha Dre had brought 2 sealed memory units from the archive and placed them under independent power. Torvin Kale arrived last. He was narrow-faced and careful in his movements, with a calibration technician's gray jacket fastened neatly despite the emergency. He took one look at the biological seal on Talene's portable display and then looked away with professional restraint. We need everyone's location during the storage access and the first drive reversal, Bennett said. Torvin frowned at him. Who placed an outside investigator in command? No one. Talene is in command. I am asking the question that keeps her from becoming the answer. Talene did not thank him. Bennett had not expected her to. Letha opened the local camera records. The images are intact. Each section signed its own data before the network separated. One by one, the views appeared. Talene stood in the auxiliary laboratory, leaning over a field map. Torvin was in the calibration bay, checking an energy manifold. Hessa stood at the oxygen plant. Jorik was in the robot depot. Letha herself sat inside the archive. Each image carried the same display time. Each image was real. Bennett stepped closer. No cuts. None, Letha said. The local signature chain would show any removal or replacement. Could the clocks be wrong? Torvin answered before Talene could. They are locally correct. Bennett looked at him. That sounded rehearsed. It is the central rule of our work. Talene brought up a field diagram. During calibration, a clock in one section can run slightly faster or slower than a clock in another. The difference may accumulate to several minutes. After the cycle, the system uses the calibration schedule and measured field state to translate every record onto a shared line. Show me that translation. Letha's hand stopped. She searched the archive index, then the emergency mirror. The conversion table is gone, she said. Delete it. Bennett asked. cut away from the chain. The raw measurements remain, but the table that tells us how to compare them is missing. Torvin folded his arms. Talene wrote the original manual calibration tasks. Her authorization open storage. We should consider the simplest explanation. Talene's expression went still. Bennett watched Torvin, not her. Simple explanations are useful when the facts are simple. You saw the seal. I also saw 5 people standing in 5 places at the same display time. Either all of you learn to divide yourselves, or the time is not doing what you think it is. Hessa touched her oxygen display. We have a pressure drop in the outer research section. Before anyone could answer, a heavy door closed somewhere beyond central control. The sound traveled through the frame as a deep metallic strike. One corridor on Jorik's map turned black. Automatic isolation, Jorik said. We just lost the direct route to the drive section. Can you reopen it? Talene asked. Not while the frame reports a load fault. Hessa compared 2 displays. The door log says it closed 30 seconds ago. The oxygen volume says that section stopped exchanging air more than 2 minutes ago. Silence settled across the room. Bennett turned back to the camera images. Through a small observation window in Talene's laboratory, a bright star rested just above the curve of Velorum. In Torvin's image, taken at what the clock called the same moment, the same star sat visibly lower. There, Bennett said. Talene moved beside him. The optical sensors are independent, and the star is not taking instructions from your network. He enlarged both frames. We stop, asking what time the clocks say. We ask what happened before what. Star position. Oxygen cycles. Heat. Where? Anything that moves in only one physical direction. Talene studied the difference between the images. Her suspicion did not disappear, but something new entered it. Interest. I can use the physical order to rebuild possible field states, she said. But you cannot treat ordinary wear as if the field has no effect. Then you check my physics, and I check your schedule. We verify every conclusion twice. Now we are speaking the same language. Another pressure door sealed. The orbit line tightened toward Velorum. Talene looked around at her crew. Essa, give us the true oxygen sequence. Jorik, locate the maintenance robot that crossed the section boundary. Letha, preserve every local record. Torvin, provide the full calibration schedule. Torvin inclined his head. Of course. Bennett caught the pause before the answer. It was small. Not evidence. Not yet. Talene faced Bennett. We have a little over 2.5 hours. He closed the false shared time display. Then let us find out which truth happened first. Hessa led them toward the oxygen plant by the only route that remained open. The direct corridor had sealed, so they went inward through the station's central ring and back out along a narrow service passage. Every detour cost time. Bennett could feel it in the changing pull beneath his boots. Radian 9 had been designed to provide a mild, steady sense of down through rotation and controlled field work. Now the drive thrust added a sideways weight that shifted whenever the engines changed phase. Talene walked with one hand near the wall. Does the field affect you less? Bennett asked. Relon balance organs adapt faster than human ones. That sounds convenient. It stops being convenient when the field changes faster than we can adapt. She stepped over a raised seam without looking down. Bennett's boot caught it. Talene's mouth moved at one corner. You can enjoy that after we survive, he said. I already did. The oxygen plant occupied a low chamber lined with pipes and pressure reservoirs. Frost coated one valve in a thick white collar. A second valve farther down the line had only a thin haze. Hessa pointed to the system map. The outer research section stopped exchanging air before its door reported closure. I diverted the remaining flow to the central ring, but I cannot support every section. How many can you keep breathable? Talene asked. Central control, the field laboratory, and one moving route. If another main line seals, I choose between the archive and the drive access. Letha's data would mean nothing if everyone died. It would also mean nothing if Torvin's plan, whatever it was, destroyed the archive. Bennett understood why Hessa had not made the choice yet. He crouched by the frost-covered valve. The log says this closed 30 seconds before we saw the pressure alarm, he said. Correct, Hesse replied. This much ice took longer. Talene knelt on the other side. She held a sensor near the pipe, then checked the metal temperature at 3 points. Under the field state in the official schedule, perhaps 40 seconds, she said. Bennett pointed to the thinner frost on the second valve. That one is supposed to have closed first. Yes, but it stayed warm longer. Talene looked between them. Then the official schedule is in the wrong order. Hesse frowned. The plant follows pressure, not field calibration. The valves do, Talene said. The time labels do not. She brought up the calibration schedule Torvin had sent. The sequence showed 3 field states moving around the station in a clean pattern. Talene rearranged the first 2. The physical temperatures matched. More importantly, the camera positions began to make sense. Talene's laboratory image had been recorded earlier in shared physical time than its number suggested. Hesse's image had been recorded later. Both were genuine. Both clocks had displayed the same time. Bennett stood. One piece of the line. A small piece, Talene said. We still do not know the true field strength after the sample moved. But now we know someone ran the schedule out of order. She enlarged a command block buried beneath. The second calibration phase. It described the station's effective mass for the orbital controller. The value belonged to the state before it. Talene's gaze hardened. The drive did not receive an illegal command, meaning the command was valid. The mass value was valid. They were combined in the wrong phase. The controller believed the station was drifting in the opposite direction, so it corrected the wrong way. A good order built from honest pieces. Just like the alibis. Bennett looked at the backup schedule again. Torvin had delivered it quickly, with every command arranged in the same false sequence the network wanted them to believe. Who can change the phase order? He asked. I can. Torvin can. Jorik can execute a limited emergency sequence, but he cannot edit the field values. And your old scheduled tasks? Talene rose. You keep returning to that, because you keep stepping around it. Hesse pretended to study the oxygen map. The courtesy made the tension worse. Talene lowered her voice. This is not the place. The right place keeps losing oxygen. For a moment, Bennett thought she would finally answer. Instead, a warning flashed across Hesse's panel. The maintenance corridor near Orrin's accident site had begun to deform. If that frame locks, we lose the original scene, Bennett said. Talene closed the calibration display. Then we move. Hesse gave them 2 compact air units. The service route stays breathable for about 18 minutes. That estimate comes from volume, not the clock. I'm beginning to like you, Bennett said. I will try to recover. The service passage narrowed as it approached the maintenance ring. Bennett and Talene moved single file, their air units resting against their backs. The station's sideways pull grew stronger. Talene's explanation came in short pieces as they walked. No clock had reversed. In each section, time had moved forward normally for the people and machines inside it. The field only changed how quickly one section's clock advanced relative to another. A few seconds of difference in one phase became more in the next. A person who knew the schedule could leave a section whose clock was slow, cross during a transition, and appear on camera in a section whose clock was fast. The same displayed time could hide more than one physical moment. So everyone told the truth, Bennett said, about where they were when their local clock showed that number. And someone counted on us asking the wrong question. Yes. They reached Orrin's corridor with 9 minutes of breathable reserve remaining. The doorway stood half closed. One side of its frame had twisted inward. Emergency crews had removed Orrin's body and the larger debris, but the surface marks remained. Bennett photographed the floor, the wall, and the door track before stepping closer. The scrape on the emergency litter matched a line beside the threshold. The litter had not simply rolled away after the accident. It had slid sideways when a force struck the station, then been pulled forward. The report says the drive test was over, he said. Talene checked the field residue trapped in the frame sensor. The test state had ended according to the normalized record. What does the medal say? She gave him a look. You are enjoying that phrase. A little. Talene placed 3 small markers along the bent frame and projected the forces that could have shaped it. The first bend had happened while pressure remained equal on both sides. The second came after the corridor began losing air. The official record reversed those events. Bennett examined a reinforced plate near the hinge. 2 small crescent marks cut into its edge. "Someone brace this," he said, then removed the brace. Emergency crews may have done that. Their tool list does not include anything with this jaw width. Talene checked the marks. A calibration clamp would fit. Who uses those? My team. Torvin most often. Bennett did not turn it into an accusation. A tool type was not a person. He traced the force order in the air. Orrin entered while the door appeared stable. The door received its close command before the local record says it did. Then the load shifted. He was caught because the system executed events in a different physical order. Talene stared at the half-closed doorway. "This was the first run," she said quietly. "The first run of what?" "The altered calibration pattern. There was a short, irregular cycle before Orrin died. We classified it as a sensor fault." "Who classified it?" Her jaw tightened. "I approved the classification." "Because you believed it?" "Because the data was incomplete." "That was not what I asked." The pale markings at her temples darkened. Before she could answer, the frame groaned. A fresh line appeared in the pane above them. Bennett took one last scan of the clamp marks. "We are done here." They backed out as the door twisted another fraction inward. 30 seconds after they cleared the passage, it sealed against the frame and disappeared from Jorik's accessible map. Talene did not speak until they reached air. "Orrin's death was not separate," she said. "No. Was he a target?" "I cannot prove that. The pattern looks like someone tested a method and accepted whatever happened." That answer hurt her more than a claim of deliberate murder might have. Orrin had not needed to matter to the saboteur. The station itself was the target. Jorik contacted them from Central Control. "I found a maintenance robot. It is in the outer transfer link. Can you bring it back?" Talene asked. "The remote commands are arriving out of order." Its local controller stopped at a sealed door. Hessa joined the channel. "That link has 6 minutes of usable air. Maybe 7 if the leak stays steady." Bennett adjusted his air unit. "Send me the route." Talene stopped him. "You just came out of a low-air corridor. And the robot crossed more clock boundaries than anyone on this station. We can lose a machine. We cannot lose what it saw. You do not know that it saw anything. That is why it is called investigating." Jorik cut in. "The link door can be opened locally, but the frame is under load. If it moves early, it will not stop." Talene studied the route and the oxygen estimate. "I am coming. Your station needs you at the field controls. My station needs the robot, according to you." Bennett could have argued. Instead, he handed her the second line from his equipment case. They reached the outer transfer link through a ladder well. The sideways thrust made the descent feel like crawling across a wall. At the bottom, Talene connected her line to the local anchor while Bennett tested the pressure door. Beyond it, the robot sat motionless in a dim corridor. It was a low 6-wheeled unit with a jointed lifting arm folded over its body. The air indicator counted down by pressure volume. No timestamp appeared. "Good," Bennett said. "You approve of a machine because it has no clock. I approve of anything that knows its limitations." Jorik opened the door from the adjacent local controller. Bennett went through first. The cold hit immediately. Thin crystals drifted near the floor where moisture had frozen in the falling pressure. He clipped the robot to his line, released its brake, and pulled. The wheels resisted. "One motor is locked," he said. Talene stayed at the threshold, watching the load marks on the frame. "You have less than 4 minutes of air volume." Bennett unfolded the lifting arm and used it as a lever. The locked wheel rose just enough for the robot to move. He pulled again. Halfway back, the pressure door shifted. "Bennett, leave it," Talene said. The frame groaned. The door began to slide. He could reach safety before it closed, but not with the robot. The machine carried the only physical traveler that had crossed several local time systems. He wrapped the line around its front axle and threw his weight backward. The robot rolled. The door accelerated. Talene diverted power from somewhere else. The corridor lights went black and the door slowed for 1 second. It was enough. Bennett pulled the robot through. The door caught its folded arm and snapped the outer casing loose. The force drove Bennett into the wall. His left shoulder twisted under the line. Pain flashed down his arm. Talene hit the local close control. The door sealed behind the robot with a heavy strike. For several breaths, Bennett sat against the wall while his shoulder burned. Talene knelt beside him. "Can you move your fingers?" He did. "All present." "Your shoulder?" "Angry." That is not a medical description. It is the description the shoulder provided. She checked the joint with careful hands, stopping when his face tightened. "Strain, perhaps more. Hesse needs to examine it." Bennett looked past her at the robot. "Did we get it?" Talene sat back on her heels. "You nearly lost an arm for a machine. I nearly hurt an arm for evidence. There is a difference. Only to an investigator. You cut power to the auxiliary experiment bank. The door needed energy. That bank held your field data. A partial copy." She rose and offered him her hand. "And you were not a copy." Bennett took it with his right hand. Neither of them mentioned the moment again. Hesse secured his shoulder in a flexible support and gave him a pain blocker mild enough to leave his judgment clear. Bennett refused anything stronger. The manual drive controls would require both arms if they reached that point. In central control, Jorek removed the robot's damaged casing. Its electronic log was almost useless. The displayed time jumped forward, repeated, then appeared to move backward whenever the machine crossed into a new section. "The memory is intact," Jorek said. "The clocks are the problem." "Then ignore the clocks," Bennett replied. They began with the wheels. The left front tread carried fine black dust from the calibration bay. Beneath it sat a film of pale storage sealant. Over both lay reddish residue from the drive corridor. The layers could not reverse themselves. Jorek pulled the battery record. Each wheel rotation and lift arm cycle had consumed energy, no matter what time the section displayed. Talene used that consumption to estimate how long the robot had moved. Bennett used tread where to estimate distance. The path emerged. Calibration bay, storage vault, maintenance spine, drive corridor. All during a period the network had compressed into one displayed minute. Jorek stared at the result. "That route takes at least 9 minutes with every door open." "Longer with a load," Bennett said. He enlarged the floor scans Jorek kept for maintenance. A fresh pair of compression lines ran beside the robot tracks. "Standard carrier wheels?" he asked. Jorek nodded slowly. "The heavy maintenance cart. Could it move the primary sample?" If the sample was in a low field state. Talene overlaid the altered schedule. It was. The robot had not carried the sample. It had crossed the same route after a maintenance cart did and collected residue from each section. Someone had moved the sample along a path hidden inside the false shared time. Who knew the door transitions? Bennett asked. "Talene," Torvin said. "Myself." Jorek had operational access. Jorek's face tightened. "I did not write the calibration schedule, but you control the carriers and the robot." "Enough," Talene said. "We have a route, not a person." Bennett looked at each alibi again. Talene and Torvin understood the field timing. Jorek controlled the equipment. Hesse controlled air routes. Letha controlled data. The mechanism had narrowed the impossible, but not yet the guilty. A warning rolled across Hesse's display. The corridor back to Orrin's site had lost pressure completely. Jorek tried the local controls. The door did not respond. "That evidence is now beyond reach," he said. Bennett touched the scanner, holding the clam marks. "Not all of it." Talene looked at the layered residue on the robot wheel. "Someone used real records, real access, and real time," she said. "Yes. No camera. No false location. Only a false order." The orbit estimate dropped below 2 hours. For the first time since Bennett arrived, Talene looked at him without suspicion. Not with trust. They had not earned that yet, but with the recognition that his method had found something hers could not. Bennett felt the same recognition in return. Neither of them could finish the line alone. They spent the next 15 minutes turning that recognition into a usable sequence. Bennett cleared the shared time labels from the central display. In their place, He arranged events by things that could not reverse themselves. First came the star at the edge of the calibration sensor. Then the warm valve entered its cooling curve. Then the maintenance cart crossed the storage floor, leaving its damaged wheel pattern in fresh sealant. The robot followed later, gathering the same materials on its tread while consuming a measurable amount of battery power. After that, the orbital controller accepted the mass value from the wrong field phase. Finally, the outer oxygen section isolated and the first pressure door froze. The sequence expanded what the network called 1 minute into more than 9 minutes of physical activity. Talene added possible clock rates beside each event. When the calibration field slowed one section's clock and accelerated another, the 5 camera images no longer occupied the same moment. They became separate windows along the physical line. Hessa had truly been in the oxygen plant when her clock showed the marked time. Jorik had truly been beside the robot depot when his clock showed it. Letha had truly remained inside the archive. Talene's laboratory record continued without a break through the entire interval when the vault opened in physical time. Torvin's image and calibration was also real, but it ended before the cart crossed storage in physical time. The displayed number made those events appear simultaneous. The star and the cooling metal showed they were not. His image does not prove he took the cart, Talene said. No, it proves his camera did not prevent him. The same is true for Jorik. Yes, Jorik accepted that without protest. Then find something that separates us. Bennett looked at the physical line. That is what the next piece has to do. The exercise changed more than the suspect list. It gave them a common grammar. Bennett could state that a plate bent before a valve froze. Talene could translate that order into the only field states capable of producing it. Neither method had to pretend it was complete. Letha found the source of the vault command 12 minutes later. She had been rebuilding the authorization chain from its local blocks rather than the missing shared table. Each block could be added, but not rewritten without breaking every signature after it. The task that opened the storage vault had been created months earlier. By Talene, Bennett saw the result on Letha's private display. He did not say anything at first. The task was labeled as a manual field calibration. It included temporary access to the sample vault and permission to delay 2 automatic stops. The official safety file contained no matching event. Does Talene know you found this? He asked. She asked me to recover every source block, including her own. That is not an answer. No, Letha said. She does not know yet. Bennett copied the chain to his evidence unit. The easy response would have been to gather the crew and present it. Talene's credential had opened the vault. Her old task had provided the mechanism. She had hidden the event from the official file. Easy responses had ruined his last major investigation. He went to the field laboratory. Talene stood beside the empty sample cradle, checking the 3 smaller cases. She had removed her command jacket and rolled back her sleeves. The pale markings at her temples were darker now, a visible sign of fatigue. Letha recovered the original task, Bennett said. Talene's hand stopped. He waited. She closed the case in front of her. How much? Enough. Does Torvin know? Not for me. Talene looked at the empty cradle for a long moment. Gather everyone in central control. You know what I'm going to ask? Yes. You could answer here. No. If I tell only you, it becomes another private truth. She walked past him before he could reply. The crew assembled around the orbital display. The red path had drawn closer to Velorum. Hessa had shut down another research section to keep the archive and laboratory supplied with air. Jorik's door map now showed the station as a broken chain of habitable islands. Talene stood where everyone could see her. The biological authorization used to open storage came from a task I created, she said. Months ago, I extended a field cycle beyond its approved stop. Jorik stared at her. Hessa lowered her eyes. Torvin remained very still. Talene continued. The data sequence could not be reproduced if the cycle ended. I authorized a manual extension and delayed 2 safety stops. Afterward, I filed an incomplete record because I believed Nexera would close the program. After Oren died, I also approved the first altered cycle as a sensor fault without reopening that old task. A full review would have exposed what I had hidden. I did not know the cycle had been used to close his door, but I chose not to ask enough questions. Believe? Hessa asked. Or knew? I believed it strongly enough to make a decision. I had no right to hide. Torvin stepped toward the command console. Then you should surrender station authority immediately. I am surrendering sole command authority, Talene said. Hessa will control oxygen allocation. Jorik will approve door changes. Letha will hold all research records. I will retain technical control of the field because no one else can replace that function. Convenient, Torvin said. Necessary, Bennett replied. Torvin turned. Your investigator has known her for barely 2 hours. Long enough to know that removing the only qualified field controller while the station is falling would be a poor legal strategy. Talene looked at Bennett, surprised by the support. He did not soften it. Her confession does not clear her. It gives us facts to test. And if the facts show I caused this, Talene asked, then the facts show it. She nodded once. That was the only assurance she wanted. Letha transferred the raw authorization blocks to the shared evidence display. The task had been created during Talene's unauthorized extension, but the vault opening occurred in the present crisis. The station had executed the old permission inside a new calibration phase. Bennett placed Talene's laboratory image beside the star record, Hess's oxygen cycle, and the robot path. Talene was here when the vault opened in physical time, he said. Torvin pointed to the biological seal. The system says otherwise. The system says she created the permission. It does not say her hand opened the door today. He traced the physical order. The star had crossed the laboratory sensor before the storage door moved. The oxygen plant had entered its next cycle afterward. The robot's battery use placed the carrier route between them. Talene's laboratory camera had recorded her through the entire interval. She had a safety violation, Bennett said. She did not move the sample or reverse the drive. Hessa let out a breath. Jorik looked angry, but no longer uncertain about the current crime. Torvin's expression barely changed. Then someone stole her permission. Someone called a task they knew existed, Bennett said. Talene faced her crew. My violation created the opening. I will answer for that when this is over. If this is over, Torvin said. It will be, she replied. The certainty in her voice was not performance. She had given away her authority, her defense, and likely her career. What remained was purpose. Bennett understood why people followed her. After the meeting, he found her alone in the connecting corridor outside the archive. Velorum storms filled the narrow window. You did not use the confession to close the case, she said. It did not close the case. Many investigators would have preferred a complete answer. I was one of them once. She waited. Bennett flexed his left hand. The support around his shoulder tightened with the movement. A transport station lost a fuel module 3 years ago, he said. The timestamps placed one mechanic inside the service bay. He had also hidden an unrelated repair error. I decided the lie and the theft belonged together. They did not. The system clock had reset during a power transfer. Physical wear on the loading rail proved the module left earlier. I saw the wear. I trusted the time. What happened to the mechanic? He lost his license before the review corrected my report. And you? I kept mine. Talene looked back at the planet. That does not feel fair. It was not. So now you trust no clock. Now I try not to make one mistake in the opposite direction. She turned to him. You nearly did with me. Yes. The admission rested between them, clean and uncomfortable. From now on, Talene said, no private assumptions. Yours or mine. Every conclusion checked twice, even when one of us dislikes the result. Especially then, the markings at her temples lightened. It was not forgiveness. It was something more useful, an agreement. Jorah called them to the robot bay. He had identified the reddish residue from the drive corridor. It was a sealant used only around a balance cavity beside the engine spine. The cavity did not appear in the normal storage map because it was part of the structural load system, no room. The route to it remained open through one service tunnel. How long? Bennett asked Hessa over the channel. 22 minutes before the Tunnel drops below safe oxygen. Less if the next frame seals. Talene collected a portable field sensor. Then we go now. The tunnel was barely wide enough for the two of them to move side by side. Bennett's injured shoulder brushed the wall whenever the station shifted. Talene noticed and adjusted her pace without mentioning it. At the far end, a maintenance panel had been removed and replaced loosely. Fresh carrier marks ended beneath it. Bennett lifted the panel with his right arm. Talene helped guide it aside. The primary sample rested inside a structural cradle. It looked almost disappointing. A dark oval no larger than a human fist floated a fraction above its mouth. Faint distortions bent the edges of the cavity behind it. "Do not touch the frame," Talene said. Bennett was already studying the floor. The metal bowed toward the sample in one section and away from it in another. "It is loading the structure." "Yes." Talene moved the field sensor around the opening. Her concern deepened with each reading. The sample is being used as an adjustable weight. Its ordinary mass is small, but the active field changes the effective load across the station. "Can you shut it down?" "Not from here." The primary control link was cut. "Remove it." "If we move it now, the load shifts all at once. The engine frame may twist before we can correct." Bennett looked down the tunnel toward the distant vibration of the drives. Finding the sample had not solved anything. It had made the danger visible. What about the smaller samples? They can reproduce part of the field. Enough to take this one out? Talene calculated in silence. "For about 6 minutes," she said. "Perhaps less under the current energy limit." Remote control? The command buffers between sections are no longer preserving order. I would have to operate inside the field chamber. What does that do to you? Relon physiology tolerates changing acceleration better than yours. That was not what I asked. It would impair balance, sight, and fine control. If the gradient rises too quickly, I may lose consciousness. Then no. Talene looked at him with open disbelief. "You do not command me." "You." Surrendered command. "Not to you." Despite himself, Bennett almost smiled. "We are not doing it until there is a drive plan," he said. 6 minutes is not enough for improvisation." "Agreed." That stopped the argument. Talene did not need permission. She needed a plan worthy of the risk. Jorik inspected the cavity through Bennett's scanner feed. "The maintenance arm can reach the cradle from the adjacent bay. I can move the sample without putting anyone in the tunnel." "Under a stable field," Talene said. "Under your field," Jorik said. "Yes." Bennett scanned the carrier tracks. One will had a damaged edge that left a repeating notch in the dust. The same pattern appeared in maintenance bay records from earlier that day. "Which carrier made these marks?" he asked. Jorik searched the equipment list. "The unit assigned to calibration. Torvin's unit. Still not proof. Equipment could be borrowed. Access could be copied." Bennett stored the match and said nothing over the open channel. They resealed the panel and reached the archive before the tunnel lost air. Letha was waiting for them. The room was smaller than Bennett expected, lined with plain black memory blocks rather than dramatic towers of light. Each measurement was written onto one block, signed, then linked to the next. A later record could explain an earlier one, but it could not silently replace it. The request that cut the translation table came through Nexra's liaison channel. Letha said. It did not erase the raw field measurements. "Why not?" Bennett asked. "Because they are distributed across the chain. If someone removes one, every later signature breaks. We would know exactly where the damage began. Then why drop the whole station?" "Because physical destruction removes the chain and the people who can rebuild it." Talene stood at the central reader. "Show us the measurements Nexra labeled as environmental noise." Letha hesitated. Those records were restricted. Talene placed her palm beside the reader, then stopped before touching it. "My authority is no longer sufficient," she said. Letha studied her, then used her own archive access. The records opened. They showed controlled field. Pulses from Radian Nine's research program, followed by external sensor data stored from Ilion and Karis. The colony readings had been attached months earlier, then hidden under a noise classification. Bennett did not understand every measurement. He did not need to. The physical order was plain. A field activation was followed by transmission to a remote test system, then by structural and atmospheric disturbances on an inhabited colony. The sequence repeated with another activation and another disturbance. Talene enlarged the response from Ilion. The curve began with a slight lift in local ground load, then a fast drop that had been labeled as sensor error. Kari showed the same shape at lower strength. That is our field signature, she said. The interval between the rise and drop comes from the sample lattice. It cannot be produced by weather. Letha opened the attachment history. Nexera had added the colony measurements to Radian Nine's archive, classified them as environmental noise, and then requested a new calibration range from Talene's team without telling them where it would be used. They were not merely studying our old results, Talene said. They adjusted the next test from them. Bennett heard the shift in her voice. The program she had broken rules to protect had already been taken beyond her control. Preserving its reputation now mattered less than preserving the people harmed by it. Can the chain show who attached the colony data? He asked. It shows the Nexera liaison channel, Letha said. The personal source is hidden behind the organization seal. Torvin was the station's operator for that channel, but access alone was still not a physical act. Bennett added it to the line without pretending it was more. These were live colonies, Bennett said. Yes, Talene replied. Did your team know? No. Nexera told us the remote receivers were unmanned calibration platforms. Letha brought up the authorization sources. The commands had passed through the same technical liaison channel Torvin operated for Nexera. Talene looked sick. They used our work on people. And now someone is destroying the evidence, Bennett said. The sample had not been placed near an escape route. It had been placed where its field would magnify structural imbalance as the orbit fell. No thief would do that to something he intended to steal. The target was Radian 9 itself. Every person aboard was part of the evidence the saboteur meant to erase. We have motive, access, the calibration carrier, and his liaison channel, Talene said. We isolate him now. Bennett shook his head. What more do you need? A physical act tied to him. We do not have time for courtroom standards. This is not about a courtroom. If we lock him out and we are wrong, we lose an active control route. If we accuse him without trapping his access, he may trigger something else. You believe it is Torvin. I believe the line points to Torvin. Belief is not a locked door. Talene paced once, then stopped when the station's sideways pull shifted. The clamp marks at Orin's door, Bennett said. He opened the scan. The reinforced plate had been temporarily held during the first altered cycle. When the station's load changed during a recovery burn, the plate would bend around the remaining tool impressions. Once that happened, the marks would become a permanent record of the brace type and the route used. The person who made those marks knows what they mean, he said. He has to remove or damage that plate before we change the thrust direction. Torvin knows we examined the site. He does not know how much I recorded. I will tell everyone the service route is about to be sealed for the recovery burn. And leave him a way in. One way. Jorah controls the doors locally. We watch the frame response, not the cameras. Talene understood. A person entering the deformed route would put weight on the supports in a sequence Bennett had already mapped. The station itself would show them where he went. You will be in that route with an injured shoulder, she said. You will be inside a field chamber that may make you unconscious. That is not an argument. No, it is an observation. For one quiet second, the emergency noise seemed distant. Talene stepped closer. Do not make me trust you and then treat your own life as expendable. Bennett met her eyes. The same rule applies to you. Neither promised safety. They were beyond promises no one could keep. They promised only not to waste what the other was risking. The orbital alarm changed tone. Hess's voice came over the channel. We are under 20 minutes from the recovery limit. Talene went to the drive model. Fuel remained for one complete recovery sequence. No second attempt. She calculated 3 versions of the same burn based on the 3 structural load states still possible. The first assumed Torvin's brace remained. The second assumed he had partly removed it. The third assumed the plate had locked completely. Bennett would not calculate gravitational fields in the last seconds. He would read the structure and select the version Talene had already built. Jorg prepared the maintenance arm beside the hidden sample. Hessa moved oxygen to central control, the field laboratory, and the service route. Letha locked the raw data chain onto independent power. Before they separated, Talene made Bennett rehearse the recovery sequence without fuel. She placed 3 structural states on his manual display. Each showed the same total thrust, but the order and spacing of the pulses changed. "You are not choosing the version that looks closest," she said. "You're choosing by load order. Left support, central frame, right support. If the left support heats first and the center twists afterward. Variant 1. If the center twists before the right support takes load. Variant 2. If the reinforced plate stops responding. Variant 3. And if the readings show a 4th state. We do not burn." Talene held his gaze. "Even if the clock says we have no time. The clock has lost voting rights. Bennett, I will not fire outside the 3 states you calculated." She nodded. The answer mattered because he had the authority and the physical access to ignore her once they separated. He pointed to her field curve. "Your turn. If Hessa calls the hard stop, I end the field. Even if the sample is still moving, if I lose response, I cannot control the gradient. Continuing would not save the station. And if you are still responsive, I decide." Bennett wanted a stricter promise. It would have been dishonest to demand one while refusing to abandon his own route. "Fair," he said. Talene set the star sensor to the common optical line. 1 star. 1 final mark. No count from either clock. And 2 flashes for the most likely load. Do not choose it because it is likely. Choose it because the station says so. Now we are speaking the same language. 1 more outer door sealed. The living station had shrunk to 3 connected islands. Talene loaded the small samples into the field chamber. Bennett checked the support around his shoulder and studied the 3 burn sequences until he could see their differences without reading the labels. At the edge of central control, Torvin watched them prepare. He still wore the same calm expression. Bennett opened the internal channel. "All crew, the maintenance route beside the engine spine will be permanently sealed before the recovery burn. No one is to enter that section." Torvin's eyes moved toward the door map. Only once. This time, Bennett was ready for it. Preparation turned the 3 surviving sections into separate parts of one machine. Hessa shut the oxygen feeds to every sealed corridor and concentrated the remaining supply around central control, the field laboratory, and the service route Bennett intended to use. The choice left half the station dark and empty. Jorg moved to the local console beside the field chamber. From there, his maintenance arm and Talene's controls shared the same section clock. They would not depend on commands crossing time boundary. Letha closed the archive door and linked the raw measurement blocks to independent power. She could not make the data indestructible. She could make sure no missing network command erased it quietly. Talene aligned 1 optical sensor in the field laboratory with the same reference star Bennett would see from central control. Between the 2 sections, they opened an old maintenance light path that carried no time stamps and no buffered instructions. Bennett could send 1, 2, or 3 white flashes to show which burn version matched the physical load. The flashes would select the plan. The star would tell them when to act. If the light path fails, Jorg asked. Talene sealed the first small sample into its mount. "I hold the neutral field curve until the star reaches the reference line." Bennett chooses the safest burn from his side. "And if his sensor fails?" Hessa asked. Bennett checked the independent optical scope above the drive controls. "Then we do not burn blind." "And we fall," Hessa said. "Yes." No one pretended otherwise. Torvin remained at the calibration console. He had objected to the local door controls, arguing that they removed useful automation during an emergency. Talene had answered that automation was how the emergency began. Now he watched Jorg test the maintenance arm. Bennett stood near the service entrance, appearing to study the engine frame. In reality, he watched Torvin's reflection in the dark surface of a dead display. The station shuddered. Hessa announced, 15 minutes. Torvin touched his console. "I need to verify the calibration manifold before the field starts." Talene did not look up from the sample mounts. The manifold is stable. According to local data. All data is local now. Then you understand why I should inspect it. Bennett kept his voice casual. The route is restricted. You announce that it will be sealed, not that it is unsafe. I am clarifying. Torvin's gaze settled on him. An investigator with no field training is clarifying safety for a calibration specialist. I contain multitudes. The humor did not change Torvin's expression. He turned back to his console. For a few seconds, Bennett wondered whether the bait had been too obvious. Then the lights dimmed as HFY shifted another oxygen pump. Torvin moved. He left through the inner access door without requesting permission. His path appeared on no reliable shared map. It did not need to. Bennett waited. The first deformed support gave a faint metallic tick. Then the second. Not vibration from the drive. Wait. Someone had stepped into the service route. Bennett touched the local control at his wrist. Jorik closed the door behind Torvin. Not all the way, but enough to remove the easy retreat. The pressure changed. Air moved through a cracked seal and stirred dust across a floor sensor. Bennett watched the pattern, then entered the route from the opposite side. His left shoulder protested the moment he pulled himself through the angled hatch. He ignored it and kept his right hand on the rail. The passage was almost dark. Thin service lights ran along the floor, illuminating the bent supports one after another. The first support flexed. The third stayed still. The second answered with a low creak. Torvin had taken the path toward Orrin's reinforced plate. Bennett moved carefully. If he rushed, his own weight would confuse the sequence. He waited for each support to settle before crossing onto it. Ahead, metal scraped against metal. He reached the final bend and saw Torvin kneeling beside the plate with a calibration clamp in his hand. The clamp's jaws matched the marks in Bennett's scan. Torvin looked over his shoulder. You should be at the drive controls, he said. You should be at calibration. This plate will destabilize the route when the load reverses. Then why remove the old tool marks? Torvin's eyes moved to the clamp. Routine preparation. With a tool signed out to your carrier. Along the route your carrier used to move the sample. Jorik controls the carriers. And the robot carried residue in the order your schedule try to hide. Torvin stood. He did not confess. He did not explain Nexra or the colonies. He simply stepped toward the local door control. Bennett triggered Jorik's lock. The door at Torvin's back closed. Torvin entered an override code. Nothing happened. You cut station authority from the doors, he said. Jorik placed them under local control. Then Jorik has trapped us both in a section that is about to take engine load. Only one of us. Bennett had positioned himself beside the manual release. He pulled it with his right arm. A narrow pressure gate dropped between them. Torvin lunged before it fully closed. The calibration clamp struck the edge and stopped it for half a second. Bennett drove his weight into the release. Pain tore through his injured shoulder. His grip failed. Torvin shoved the gate upward. Bennett caught the lower handle with his right hand and used the wall rail as a brace. The station's sideways pull helped him. The gate came down, forcing Torvin back. The clamp fell on Bennett's side. The gate locked. Torvin struck the clear panel with his palm. If you start the field with me sealed here, the calibration path will lose its operator. Talene is the field operator. Talene built the flaw that opened the vault. She admitted her flaw. And you think that makes her trustworthy? Bennett picked up the clamp. The jaw width was exact. No, he said. Her actions after admitting it make her trustworthy. Torvin's controlled expression finally broke. Not into fear, into anger. Nexra owns every measurement on this station. That sounds like an argument for later. There will be no later if your burn fails. Then we should both hope Talene's work is better than your sabotage. Bennett connected the gate to Jorik's local lock and sent a simple confirmation. Torvin could breathe. He could not reach a network control or the reinforced plate. The trap had not depended on a confession. It had tied his body, his tool, his carrier, and his route to the physical order of the sabotage. Hessa's voice came over the local channel. 11 minutes. Bennett left Torvin in the pressure cell and moved towards central control. His left arm hung close to his side. Every vibration drove a pulse of pain through the shoulder. He had one full manual sequence ahead of him. He could not afford another struggle. In the field laboratory, Talene heard Jor confirm that Torvin was contained. She let out one breath. Then she entered the chamber. The circular door sealed behind her. 3 small samples hovered in separate mounts around the central control frame. Beyond the thick panel, Jorik sat at the maintenance console, and Hessa watched Talene's life signs. Talene checked the reference star through the local optical sensor. It had not yet reached the line. Field chamber ready, Jorik said through the direct local speaker. Maintenance arm? At the primary sample cradle. HFY. Letha answered from the adjoining local channel. Powered and locked. Talene placed both hands inside the control loops. Beginning neutral curve. The first sample activated. Weight pulled her toward the left wall. The second sample came alive, shifting the pull downward. The chamber floor seemed to roll under her feet, even though nothing moved. Her Relon balance organs adjusted after a moment, but the correction came with a wave of nausea. The third sample completed the field. For 2 seconds, everything felt stable. Then the hidden primary sample shifted in its cradle. The field snapped upward. Talene's knees bent under sudden acceleration. She held the control loops and forced the 3 curves apart before they reinforced one another. Warning bands turned amber around the chamber. Hessa's voice sharpened. Gradient above the expected range. The primary sample moved. End the cycle. If I end it now, the load returns all at once. Talene adjusted the second sample in a fraction of its normal steps. The pressure behind her eyes increased. The pale markings at her temples darkened as blood flow changed under the gradient. Through the chamber window, Jorik watched the structural reading. Load is falling on the maintenance arm, he said. Lift the primary sample by 2 centimeters. The arm moved. The chamber tilted again. Talene's vision doubled, then settled. She focused on the star sensor, not the clock beside it. The clock meant nothing outside this room. Another 2 centimeters, she said. Jorik obeyed. The primary sample's effective weight began to transfer from the station frame into the compensating field. 6 minutes had never sounded short in a laboratory plan. Inside the chamber, it was an entire physical country she had to cross without falling. Bennett reached central control with 9 minutes remaining before the orbital limit. Hessa had left his station ready. The 3 burn variants Talene calculated sat side by side on the manual display. Each used the same total fuel. Each placed the thrust pulses in a different order. Variant 1 assumed the reinforced plate remained fully braced. Variant 2 assumed partial removal. Variant 3 assumed the plate had locked under deformation. Bennett did not choose yet. He placed the calibration clamp from Torvin beside the console and opened the engine frame sensors. No single sensor told the truth. He watched them as a physical group. Heat traveled through the left support. The right support took load a fraction later. The central frame twisted toward the section where the primary sample was moving. The order matched Variant 2. Torvin had removed part of the brace before Bennett reached him, but not all of it. Bennett sent 2 white flashes through the direct maintenance light. In the chamber, Talene saw them. Variant 2. She changed the spacing of the compensating curve exactly as her own plan required. No voice crossed between them. No shared clock counted down. Only the star moved. Jorik lifted the primary sample another step. Talene's legs began to shake. Hessa watched her life signs climb. You are approaching Relon tolerance. I know. Your visual response is slowing. I know that too. Talene, can the sample move? Jorik answered. Not yet. The lower cradle is still carrying 19%. Then the field stays. Hessa could have cut power from outside. Months earlier, Talene had hidden a safety violation because she believed only she understood what the work required. This time, every person involved knew the risk, the limit, and the reason. She was not hiding the choice. She was making it openly. Continue, Hessa said, voice tight. I will call the hard stop if you lose response. Agreed. The star approached the reference line. Bennett tested the manual drive lever with his right hand. The first pulse would require his left to hold the vector lock. He closed his fingers around it. His shoulder burned. The frame sensors changed again. Variant 2 remained correct, but the first pulse needed to arrive later than Talene's original timing. Bennett adjusted the interval based on how quickly the heat crossed the central support. He was not calculating the field. Talene had already done that. He was listening to the material in front of him. The star touched the edge of the line. In the chamber, Talene saw the same light. Final lift, she told Jorik. The maintenance arm raised the primary sample free of the distorted cradle. The load vanished from one section and surged toward another. Talene pulled the 3 compensating curves into alignment. Acceleration drove her down. Her vision narrowed to the star and the control loops. In central control, Bennett fired the first engine pulse. The station slammed sideways. The left support took the force. The reinforced plate held. He fired the second pulse at the interval the heat response demanded. The orbital plot continued downward. For one terrible second, nothing changed. Bennett kept the vector lock engaged. His left arm shook. The third pulse fired. Radian 9 groaned from end to end. A warning showed the engine spine within 2% of its structural limit. The orbit line flattened. "Come on," Bennett whispered. The star crossed the center of the reference mark. Talene released the second sample by 1 measured step. The primary sample settled into the maintenance arm's isolated cradle, transferring its last dangerous load away from the station frame. Bennett fired the final pulse. The red orbit line lifted. Not quickly, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Radian 9 had stopped falling. The recovery sequence completed with almost no fuel left. In the field chamber, the small samples began to lose coherence. Talene shut them down in reverse order, preventing the compensating load from snapping away. The first sample dimmed. The second followed. When the third went dark, normal weight returned. Talene's hands slipped from the control loops. She folded to one knee. Jorik opened the chamber as soon as the field reading reached safe levels. Hessa was beside him with a medical unit. Talene tried to stand and nearly fell. "Do not," Hessa said. "The orbit." Jorik looked at the local plot. His face changed into something between laughter and exhaustion. Rising, Talene closed her eyes. At central control, Bennett released the vector lock. His left hand did not want to open. He used his right to lift it from the lever. The external communication board flickered. One carrier signal returned, then another. Letha's voice came through. "Archive power stable. Raw chain intact." Jorik reported, "Primary sample secured. Talene is conscious." Hessa added, "Barely in. She is not returning to work." Bennett let out a breath he had been holding since the first engine pulse. He sent the station's emergency beacon and orbital data toward the nearest rescue channel. A reply arrived after a delay. Rescue had received them. Behind a local pressure gate, Torv and Kale remained alive and contained. Below them, Velorum continued to turn. For the first time since Bennett entered Radian 9, every surviving system agreed on one simple fact. The station was no longer falling. Relief lasted less than a minute. Then work returned. Radian 9 had survived the recovery burn, but its structure remained twisted. Half its corridors were without air, and its fuel reserves were nearly empty. The new orbit was stable enough for rescue, not comfortable enough for carelessness. Bennett secured the drive controls in local mode and recorded the final sensor state before anyone changed it. His shoulder throbbed in time with his pulse. When he tried to lift the calibration clamp, his left hand failed to close. He used the right. Letha met him outside central control with a portable memory block. "The archive chain is intact," she said. "I need your physical records before the frame cools and the load marks change." Bennett transferred the scans of Orin's door, the carrier tracks, the robot wheel, and the pressure gate where Torvin had been trapped. He added the drive frame response from the final burn. "Do not normalize the times," he said. "I was not planning to. Keep the local labels. Add the star positions and physical order beside them." Letha understood immediately. "So no one can claim we repaired the records after the fact." "Exactly." Jorik joined them from the field laboratory. His clothes were damp with sweat, and one sleeve had torn where he had leaned over the maintenance controls. "Torvin is still secure," he said. "He wants legal access to the station network. He can want it, Bennett replied. The pressure cell is stable. I placed the robot outside it to record locally. No network. None. Good. Jorik glanced toward the clinic. Talene asked whether you were alive. Bennett looked at his injured arm. An imprecise question. I told her yes. An acceptable answer. Jorik almost smiled. The expression vanished as he looked at the calibration clamp. That is Torvin's. Can you prove it? The maintenance issue record ties the serial pattern to his calibration kit. The kit record is local and signed. Give it to Letha. Jorik did. No single piece proved the whole act. Together, the pieces closed around Torvin without needing a word from him. Bennett went to the clinic only after the evidence transfers were complete. Hessa had secured Talene on a low-treatment couch to keep the room's slight motion from worsening her balance. A sensor band rested around her temples. The pale markings beneath it had faded toward gray. Her eyes opened when Bennett entered. The orbit? She asked. Still up. The sample? Secured. The archive? Letha may be willing to defend it with her life. That sounds like her. Hessa pointed at the next couch. Seed. I am functional. So is a damaged pressure valve. Until it is not. Talene's mouth moved in the suggestion of a smile. You said you were beginning to like her. I was under stress. Bennett sat. Hessa removed the flexible support from his shoulder and examined the joint. The strain had worsened during the pressure gate fight and the manual burn. Nothing was broken, but the surrounding tissue needed rest and treatment. You will not use this arm for heavy control work for several weeks, she said. There is no fuel left for heavy control work. You will also not carry equipment. That seems excessive. I can sedate you. Bennett became quiet. Hessa treated the shoulder, then returned to Talene's readings. Your balance response is improving, she told her. You are staying here until it is stable. I need to review the sample containment. Jorik is reviewing it. He may miss a field interaction. Then you can explain it from this couch. Talene closed her eyes for a moment. Surrendering control of work came harder to her than surrendering command during the crisis. Bennett recognized the impulse. The sample isn't an isolated cradle, he said. Jorik is monitoring physical load, not just the field display. He listened. Talene opened her eyes again. You trust him? On this question? A very precise kind of trust. The only useful kind. Hessa moved to the far side of the clinic to prepare another treatment unit. For the first time since the airlock closed, Bennett and Talene had a quiet space without an immediate alarm. Outside the clinic window, Velorum no longer seemed to rise toward them. Its storms moved slowly beneath the station. You caught Torvin, Talene said. The station caught him. I read the order. You always give the metal the credit. It complains less. You have not heard our engine frame. Bennett looked at her. The humor was faint, but it was hers now too. You held the field longer than the safe estimate, he said. By 11 seconds. Hessa noticed. Hessa notices everything that can become a medical order. You could have stopped. So could you. They both knew that was not a defense. Talene looked toward the window. When I extended the old experiment, I told myself the data justified the risk. I decided alone. Today I made another decision to remain in the field. Everyone knew the limit. Everyone knew what would happen if you stopped. That makes it different. It makes it honest. She considered that. I will still lose my position. Probably. The answer surprised her. Most people offer comfort after a near disaster. Would you believe me if I said there would be no consequences? No. Then it would be poor comfort. Talene turned her head toward him. You are an unusually difficult man to appreciate. Yet you're making progress. This time she did smile. The moment held no promise beyond itself, but it changed the air between them. They had seen each other under suspicion, pain, authority, and fear. Neither was asking the other to erase what had happened. That was the beginning of something Bennett did not yet have a precise name for. Rescue reached Radian 9 several hours later. The first teams entered through the docking collar after Jorik stabilized its frame. They brought portable air supplies, structural braces, and medical transport. No one aboard the rescue craft had a reliable reason to trust the station's shared time, so Bennett handed them evidence in physical order. He began with the local camera records. They showed Talene in the auxiliary laboratory, Torvin in calibration, Hessa at the oxygen plant, Jorik in the robot depot, and Letha in the archive. All 5 images were genuine. All 5 displayed the same time. None showed the same physical moment. Then came the reference star positions, which placed the images in order without using a station clock. The oxygen cycles and frozen valves confirmed when pressure doors truly closed. The robot's battery use, wheel wear, lift cycles, and layered residue established a path from calibration to storage to the drive corridor. The carrier's damaged wheel left the same repeating notch from the vault to the hidden sample cavity. Its local issue record tied it to Torvin's work area. Talene's old authorization task explained how the vault opened under her biological seal. Her uninterrupted camera record and the physical timeline proved she was not at the door when it happened. The false mass value inside a valid calibration phase explained why the orbital controller fired the engines in the wrong direction. The tool marks at Orin's door matched the calibration clamp found with Torvin. The order of deformation showed Orin had entered before the door, executed a command that the normalized report placed later. Finally, the service supports had recorded Torvin's weight moving toward the reinforced plate after Bennett announced the route would close. The local robot recording showed him inside the pressure cell with the altar plate on one side and his clamp on the other. Torvin listened to the evidence summary without speaking. A rescue officer asked whether he wanted to respond. He said only, "Nexera will dispute ownership of the records." Letha stood beside the archive block. "Ownership does not change measurement." That was the closest anyone came to a speech. The rescue team placed Torvin under secure transport and removed him from Radian 9. No confession was required. Orin Bale's death record changed before the transport left. It no longer described an isolated maintenance accident. The door had closed in a sequence created by the first altered calibration run. Whether Torvin had expected Orin to enter that corridor could not be proven, but he had accepted the death and continued the plan. Hessa read the corrected finding in silence. Jorik placed a copy in the maintenance archive. Talene signed it from the clinic. The truth did not return Orin. It did restore the order of what had happened to him. The inquiry into Nexera began outside the station. Bennett did not follow it into meetings or legal arguments. His work was the evidence on Radian 9. The raw measurement chain remained sealed and complete. The data from Ilian and Karis could be compared to the original field pulses without depending on a later explanation. Nexera could challenge the interpretation, but it could not silently replace the sequence. Talene filed her own report before anyone ordered her to. She described the extended cycle, the delayed safety stops, and the incomplete record. She also admitted that, before Orin's death, she had approved the irregular run as a sensor fault. She did not blame the decisions on pressure from Nexera, even though that pressure had been real. She wrote that the choices had been hers. 3 weeks later, the formal result reached Radian 9. Talene lost the position of research director and all sole authority over field operations. The research program would continue under independent safety control. Because she had disclosed her violation, preserved the archive, and helped establish a verifiable process, she could remain a researcher. She also retained the right to publish the safe findings. The evidence from Ilian and Karis would be released through the investigation, not through a dramatic broadcast from the station. Talene read the decision twice. Then she went back to work. She was still recovering. Fast turns made her pause, and Hessa had forbidden her from entering an active field chamber. Talene obeyed the second order more reliably than the first. Bennett's shoulder remained in a support. He could perform scans and calculations, but Jorik refused to let him lift structural panels. "This station has developed an unhealthy interest in my medical condition," Bennett said. "Your medical condition keeps trying to become a structural problem," Jorik replied. The rescue transport scheduled to return Bennett to Earth departed without him. He sent his completed accident report with it. Talene found him in the damaged central ring after the ship had gone. He was comparing a pressure door frame to its original alignment map, using his right hand to mark the differences. "You missed your transport," she said. "I observed it leaving." That usually means a person intended to be on it. The investigation is complete. Then why are you still investigating my doors? I'm not investigating them. I am preventing Jorik from repairing them in the wrong order. From the other side of the open panel, Jorik called, I can hear you. Then the prevention is working, Bennett replied. Jorik made a sound of disapproval and moved deeper into the service space. Talene folded her arms. You could finish your report from Earth. I did finish it. Bennett. He set down the scanner. The central ring still carried scars from the crisis. Some wall panels have been replaced in a different shade. Empty doorways opened into sections not yet safe for use. The station was alive, but it was no longer pretending nothing had happened. The laboratory needs to be rebuilt, he said. It has engineers. It needs a time system that an investigator cannot misunderstand. That sounds like an insult to investigators. It is based on strong evidence. Talene stepped closer. You stayed to build a clock? Among other things. Name one. Bennett looked at her. Her position was gone. Her reputation would take years to rebuild. She had not asked him to repair either. What she wanted was a truthful answer, the same thing she had finally given him. I stayed because the work matters, he said, and because I'm not finished being here. Talene's expression softened. That second reason is not very precise. I'm expanding my methods. She let the answer stand. Rebuilding Radian 9 took months. The pressure doors came first, then the engine frame, then the field laboratory. The primary sample remained inactive until an independent team confirmed every safety layer. The smaller samples were stored under separate authorization, with no single person able to delay a stop alone. Talene helped design the new process. She did not control it by herself. Bennett helped create a method for translating local time without giving the network one hidden point of failure. Every section still kept its own clock during a field cycle. The science required that. But each record also captured direct optical markers and physical state data that anyone could compare later. They argued over the design for days. Talene wanted enough precision for serious field research. Bennett wanted every conversion to remain understandable after a network failure. She rejected his first proposal because it lost useful fractions of a second. He rejected hers because 3 hidden correction layers recreated the very weakness Torvin had used. Their final design kept the precision but displayed the correction path openly. A researcher could follow the mathematics. A maintenance worker could check the star marker and physical state. Neither person had to trust a result merely because the system called it final. The arguments never became easier. They became safer. Each knew the other would challenge the work without trying to own it. The final piece was a shared reference clock in the center of the station. It was not large. After everything Radian 9 had survived, Bennett had expected something more dramatic. Instead, the clock was a clean circular display set into a repaired wall. A separate optical sensor tied it to the same star they had used during the recovery burn. Its workings were visible behind a clear panel. No private conversion table. No hidden owner. Talene stood beside him on the day they activated it. Her balance had recovered, though Hessa still watched her whenever the field chamber opened. Bennett's shoulder had healed enough for normal work, but cold station mornings reminded him of the pressure gate. Hessa, Jorik, and Letha waited a short distance away. The clock required 2 final confirmations. Talene entered the field calibration. Bennett checked the optical position and the physical alignment. Your calculation is correct, he said. That sounded painful. I have had practice. She placed her hand on the first control. Bennett placed his on the second. For a moment, neither activated it. The clock had begun as a technical safeguard. Somewhere during the months of repair, it had become something else. It was a promise that their separate ways of seeing the world did not have to erase each other. Her field equations and his material evidence could share one honest line. Talene looked at him. Ready. We should verify that question twice. I am ready. Bennett let one quiet second pass. So am I. They pressed the controls together. The clock illuminated. Its first second crossed the display, followed by the next. Around them, the local clocks of Radian 9 continued to run at the rates the research required. They could differ. They could drift. They could tell separate local truths. Now, every one of them had a shared point to return to. Talene's hand remained beside Bennett's on the control panel. Neither moved away. The repaired station turned above Velorum, carrying the marks of what had happened and the evidence that had survived it. At the center of Radian 9, Bennett Crossley and Talene Orr watched the same clock begin. It now marked time for two people who had learned that truth was not something they inherited, but something they chose to measure together. They had saved Radian 9 not by trusting without question, but by questioning themselves, facing the cost of what they had hidden, and still reaching for the same future. If this story stayed with you, please like the video and share it with someone who loves science fiction with a human heart. Subscribe for more journeys beyond the stars. Until next time, keep looking up, keep asking questions, and remember that even in the darkest universe, truth can still lead us home.